Any one given population, about 12 to 15% of the population we would classify as special education. And of those, probably 80% or more would be integrated in regular classrooms. We would have, for some of those students, they would be withdrawn into a resource room. And so every school would have at least one teacher who would be a specialist in special education. And that's part of the big funding formula. And there would be additional resources for those students. And so we have a document called Learning for All, which talks about special education from kindergarten to grade 12, the same document, and the various ways of dealing with it. In a few school districts, there are more students withdrawn into special classes than in other school districts. And that's a decision of the municipality on how much integration. Integration, according to our policy, is the first choice, but there are school districts that have more withdrawal than others. In every place in the world, special education is very expensive. And it would be no different in Norway. We know from good practice that early on, if we can improve literacy and numeracy, we can reduce the number of students who we think are special needs, because they can learn their own strategies to be able to function easier. And a lot of work with teachers, regular teachers, on how they can create plans for the students. So our students with special needs have something called an individual education plan. And that's created, used to be created by people who were specialists. It's now created by the classroom teacher. And then working with the classroom teacher to help them. So when you have 25 students in your classroom and 5 to 8 of those have special needs, how do you as a teacher cope? And so everyone is working on the same thing. I had the strategic plan translated, so I think I have an idea of where we're going, and we'll talk about what we're doing. At 10 o'clock, we're going to visit classes. So about 10 to 10, we should take a break. So remind me, right? So that we can, before we start wandering. And when we finish, we're going to create something that looks like this. We're going to create an image of what learning looks like so that we're able to share it back with the school. Because the teachers will want to know what we saw and what we think, because they will be curious. So we're curious about what we're going to see, and they're going to be curious about what we did see, and we will share that with them. So we talked about the things we want to think about in terms of monitoring, and maybe that's not showing up as well. It's gathering evidence. So we said we're going to focus on our frame of tide, of task, instructional strategies, the design of the classroom, and student engagement. And we're using what we will see in our wanderings as another data source. Morning. It shouldn't be your only data source. And it should not be an ignored data source. So we would layer the data. So we looked at student achievement data. We look at absences from school. So like you, we track absences, especially absences in primary and elementary, because if you can cut down on those, you will have better results in high school, because the students are missing less. So we keep very careful track of those. We keep track of our students with behavioral issues and see, can we develop more strategies in class to reduce the number of incidents. And we layer all of these data with the observational data to say, this is what we think we're going to see. And is what we see the same or different? And so that then becomes another data source as we're moving along. So what are we going to do? I have given you on your tables index cards. And what I want you to write on the, everyone should take at least 2, and I have lots more if we need them. And on one side, you're going to write the T for task. On the other side, the I for instruction, D for design, and E for engagement. And what we're going to do differently is, I don't want you to do this for every class. So all the T's, I want you for the, I think we're seeing 4 classes first, you just write down on this first thing. So every class you go into, what is the task? And all the tasks are clustered. So we're not doing a separate one of these for each classes we go into, because I'm less interested in what goes on in one class than I am for the pattern of the school. Now, in your own school, you will keep track of which class, because that will make a difference. But when we're out today, it honestly doesn't matter, because none of this is dealing with performance and the teacher. This is all the pattern of what we see of learning in the school today. So whatever task you see, we're going to write down on the same little card. Whatever the instructional strategies we see, we're going to write down on the little card. And eventually what we do is we get a pattern not only of what we see, but also what we would call frequency. In most classes we saw this. In some classes we saw this. In a few classes we saw this. That we will mirror back to the teachers. What we don't say is we never saw this. Because if we go around and there are things we don't see, as the school leader, that's information for us, that's formative. If we didn't see it, it was something we talked about, but it wasn't learned. And our job is to go back and make sure it gets learned in a different way. So that's information for you for professional development. So this is focused less on performance and more on professional development. And then when you take this, as we will, and align it to the strategic and the school plan, if the school, like every school that I know, is focused on literacy and numeracy, right? Because we're all doing more or less the same things. What are the tasks you see involving literacy, and what are the tasks you see involving numeracy, because they're part of the school plan? Then when you look at the design of the classroom, What are the resources that you're seeing that are focused on literacy and numeracy? Because if we're going to be strategic, we should be spending our money on resources that align to what it is we want to do. And so those will be some of the things that we will add to as we begin to develop a snapshot, if you will, of what learning looks like in this school today. Tomorrow it might look slightly different, and that's what we say to teachers. This is our snapshot of today. You should know that, big surprise, you going into classrooms, they make people nervous. And so we may see teachers who normally would do a lot more interactive work with students do less today because they think that's what teaching is, right? We've come to see teaching. Teaching is a teacher in front of students, and we know we see more of it when we're a big group. When you're in your own school, you'll get a better picture of that. So that's just something to remember, that the principal will be able to tell us, is this really what is common, or is it a little different today? And I don't know why teachers think that they have to show us they can teach, right? Because we know they can teach. But it's part of human nature that goes on. What we are looking for is patterns and trends. So when you wander, you're going to make your notes. You're going to come back at the end of the 4 classes, and you're going to talk about in your groups what you collectively saw. Did you see similar things, or did you see different things? And then based on the consensus, I'm going to have you, for the T, for the I, for the D, for the E, write down 3 or 4 things that the group agrees on. And we're going to do that for the morning, and we're going to do that for the afternoon, and we're going to say, was it similar or different? Is what we saw in the morning consistent with what we saw in the afternoon? And that gives us the type of pattern we're looking for. In terms of the tasks, so all the time you're thinking about for the tasks and for the learning, if the student did exactly what the teacher wanted, what is that learning? Because that's what we're focused on. Because the learning will determine how the student will perform, what the student will understand, know, and be able to do. In Ontario, like in Norway, like in many places in the world, we're also focused on positive behaviors. So we're all working on character education and students to be respectful. And sometimes you will go into Ontario classes, especially for little ones, and the students will have created the class rules, and every student signs it. And then if there's an issue, the teacher just says, but we agreed. This is what we will do. For the very little ones who don't read yet, they take pictures. So you will go into a kindergarten class and there will be pictures of children sharing. The students will take pictures of one another. What does sharing look like? What does listening good look like? And so they have a visual image of those positive behaviors. Truthfully, it's rare to go into a classroom and see chaos. Happens on occasion, but it doesn't really matter where you go for the most part. students are amazingly well behaved. And we forget to tell them that sometimes. Because, you know, to come to school early in the morning and to listen hard, and for some students in a foreign language, by the end of the day, they're tired. And so, so that's something we are looking at, you know, in terms of respectful relationships and positive behaviors, and we'll know that as well. At the end of the day, what we're going to think about is what did we see, what was the patterns, the trends we saw in terms of the tasks, the instructional strategies, the design and engagement. And then in terms of engagement, if the students are compliant, if they're doing what the teacher wanted, for me, I make a check, right? So then I'm just keeping track of it. If I see that the students are, you know, whether they're 17, 18, or 4, excited about the learning, then I make a star. So that's a cue to me that I've seen something different. Most of what I see in most classes, in most schools, in most places, is students are compliant. They are doing what the teacher asks them to do. Sometimes more interested and less interested, but they are not actively creating the learning. They are receivers of the learning. And that's why now we've begun the discussion of how do you make the tasks richer? How do we build in student engagement? What will it take for us as educators to make learning different, authentic, complex, open-ended, real world, that we can engage more students? And that's part of this discussion that's going on in Ontario. When we come back, one of the things in your group I want you to be thinking about is what is judgmental. So what is an observation? You know, in the class, most students were seated together but working independently. That's an observation. And what is a judgment where you're saying, but they should have been doing something else? Because I want you to take, the judgments are okay for performance, but they're not okay here because this is about building staff capacity. And if teachers feel you're judging them, they won't want you in your class. But if they feel that you're dealing with them professional to professional, teacher to teacher, they want you there. They value your opinion. And if they're doing good things, they will invite you in. If they know you will come, they will say, we're doing this next week. I think you'd really like to come. And you will see that they are much more welcoming. Do this because you're going to ask the students questions in Norwegian. Because if I ask them questions in English, I'm going to make them scared, right? Nervous. So we're going to say, you know, you will say to the students, what are you learning? Why is it important to learn that? Why is it important for the teacher to be teaching that? Those are the things you're going to be looking at and paying attention to. Those are my questions. You will have your own questions, right? This is your country, your school, your context. There will be other questions you will be curious about. And it's all to do with being curious. And curious isn't threatening. So if you say to teachers, I'm curious. So I will sometimes say when you go into kindergarten, Remember, my background is upper secondary. And the children are playing. The little boys are building blocks, and the little girls are in whatever looks like kitchen or clothes or plays or shops. And I say to the teacher, I'm curious, when do you let the children play in a gendered role? And when do you intervene, and why? And teachers will talk about, because this is something they think about, as opposed to you should be doing this differently. Because honestly, I don't know. And what I'm interested in is what are they thinking about as the teacher? And to get teachers to think about their practice and then talk to you about their practice, that's a very, very powerful form of professional development. Even more impressive is when teachers will talk to one another. So you ask the question and let them talk and then share. Because that way they can learn from one another. So when we're wandering, we're not going to be evaluative, judgmental. We're going to look for evidence. This is what we see, and this is the evidence of what we see. So how do you tell if students are working independently or interdependently? Do you see them talking? Do you see them sharing? Is everyone doing the same task or they're different tasks? Is everyone reading the same book or they're different books? You know, these are the types of things that you want to be thinking about recording. Turn your smartphones on to vibrate. And in North America, I have to say, especially to secondary and upper secondary principals, and don't talk on the phone. You know, unless it's critical, and it rarely is, the school can do without you for 10 minutes. Someone should keep their eye on the time in your groups. We're going to spend about 10 minutes in the classroom, and then we're going to go outside and find where the next classroom is. So we've given you, in fact, 15 minutes. 10 minutes in the classroom, 5 minutes to gather yourself up, figure where you are, maybe talk quietly about what you heard or saw, and then move on. And please, please, please talk to the children.
Ok. Supert. Da hadde dere med Simon. Det var i uke 10, vel. Så hadde dere Simon når vi hadde renessansen. Vi har lagt renessansen helt bak oss, men vi må hele tiden trekke den fram også. Det tenker med denne her argumenterende teksten som vi hadde når vi var i verden, ikke sant? Det glemmer vi ikke. Nei. Så vi skal bruke disse 3 argumentene. Så bruk skriveramma hvis dere har behov for det. Den ligger fortsatt på norsken. Og så bruker dere tankekart, eller hvordan dere vil starte teksten deres. Hvilken strategi dere vil bruke, det velger dere selv. Om dere bruker skriveramma direkte, eller om dere bruker tankekart, eller hva dere gjør, dere velger læringsstrategi selv. Så jeg har skrevet at vi skal lage et strukturert tankekart. Det er valgfritt. De fleste av dere vet jeg kommer til å bruke det. Men det skal minimum ha 3 argumenter. Minimum 3 argumenter. Er det spørsmål? Nei, da sitter vi i gang da, folkens. Vær så god. Hva er det nå? Så bare rekker dere på hånda, og så spør dere.
So we've waited until the teachers finish giving the instruction, and I'm encouraging the principals to go talk to the students to find out a little bit more about the learning. And they're using the technology, and she's given them the task. And now they're just engaged in the work, and we've noticed that the schedules for the week are on some of the students' desks, and they're posted, and there's a series of resources around the room.
Teksten, og så får du en oppgave. Skal du snakke med sidemannen, og så skal du finne ut ved å gå til faktaboksen, hva får du greie på om Lucci? Snakk med sidemannen, 2 minutter. Hva får du greie på om Lucci? Du bare kikke i den faktaboksen. Øverst til høyre.
Det vi får greie på alder, antall søsken, hvilket land
40 sekunder, så hører jeg med dere.
Favorittfag, fly til fra Norge og språk og hvordan flagget ser ut.
Ser du det, Fabian? Her er jeg nå. Jeg vil kalle dette for deloverskriften, for det skal hjelpe oss etterpå å finne opplysninger. Den første deloverskriften, hva står det? Og den andre da? Noah? Den andre deloverskriften?
Hvem bor du sammen med?
Så hvis du får spørsmål etterpå, kanskje et eller annet spørre, hvem er det Lucci bor sammen med? Hvilket avsnitt er det du går inn og leiter da? Går du inn på det første? Nei, hvor går du? På den andre, nydelig. Selvfølgelig, jeg er jo en lur leser. Da går jo jeg inn dit. Og så ser vi videre, hvordan er huset deres? Kan du se den? Ja. Hva synes vennene dine om huset ditt? Ok? Og så har du de 2 siste.
You can tell that the teachers and the students are used to the technology because, you know, your teachers are very comfortable with it and your students are knowing how to respond to it, and they're very comfortable with the routines. The routines are very well established. I can tell that. And a lot of positive reinforcing from the teachers to the students. All right, we're going to do some work. And lunch is about 12 o'clock, so we've got to at least pretend to do work before lunch. So, the 4 frames, it was okay for you? It was, did it help you pay attention to things in the classroom? A little bit initially overwhelming, too much to see. Tomorrow, it will be a breeze. You won't even think about it. It will be much, much easier for you. 10 minutes enough? You could even do less than. But initially, 10 minutes is a good length of time. In your own school, right? We're not going to make teachers more nervous than they are. You can look through the students' books, the workbooks, to see what they're learning, what the teacher comments are. I would do that in your own school when you go back. I'm asking you for 1 hour a week to do this. And you all have 1 hour. That gives you easily 6 classes, 7 classes once a week. In a school where you have a vice principal, then each of you, now we're talking 12 classes, right? Once a week. There are principals who do this every day. For some of you, that's overwhelming. There are too many other things for your time, but everyone should have a week, an hour a week. That should be manageable. Put it into your schedule so that your smartphone will beep at you to remind you, because otherwise it's too easy to forget and not do. And so you mean to do it, but other things come along. We also said to our parents, sometimes you will call the school. In North America, when a parent calls the school and they want to speak to you, they expect like a fairy, you're just there, right? That's our fault, because you can't do that with any other president of any other corporation. You cannot go to your doctor and say, you know, I don't have an appointment, it's 2:30, see me now. But for you, absolutely. So we said to our parents, sometimes you will call the school and you cannot get the school leader because they're in classrooms with your children. And we know that's where you want to be. And so our parents were better with it. Some parents, still not great, but most parents were better with it. Talking to kids, was it difficult? And you will have your own questions. I've just given you my questions. And so you will create better questions. I don't actually care, as long as it deals with learning, what the questions are, but I want you to talk to the kids. Because you will find out things you didn't expect to know. In our secondary and upper secondary schools, the school leader said to us, there are children, we say, who are known to the office, right? Those are the kids who the teachers consistently say, I can't deal with them, you deal with them. Yes? You have some of these in your schools? And what you do as a principal is you never see these students other than when they come to see you, which means they've done something wrong. And when you go into classes, you will see in some teachers' classes, they work very well and they behave very well. And your relationship with those students will change because you're not seeing them only when they're doing something wrong. Now you're also seeing them when they're learning. And what we found is we had a different relationship, and those students appeared less frequently in the office. So the more visible the principal in my former school district, we could also track a decrease in behaviors around the school. And if people want to speak to you, you're now available. They don't have to come find you, your teacher. You can have much more, we call them casual conversations. So if there's something on someone's mind, they know you'll be wandering and they can catch you. And if they're doing something exciting with their class, they'll have you in. Now, a difference between North American schools and Norwegian schools is we have lots of parents in our schools. So parents volunteer, especially in elementary, to work in the schools, parents and grandparents who will take small reading groups, help with math, do those things that make it easier for teachers. And so we have that type, and they have to be cleared by the police, because of course, you know, North America, we're all crazy. So we have police checks before you can volunteer in the school. But we encourage, and in schools with a lot of immigrants, we also find that that helps. And in schools with a lot of immigrants, you would have Norwegian, we have English classes for the parents, mainly mothers. So I will show you a school maybe today or tomorrow, maybe tomorrow or Thursday, a video clip, Hi Somali, like 70% of the school is Somali. And we have special classes for the Somali moms because we had a problem with the kids getting to school. So we set up English classes for the Somali moms, and they also brought their little ones, and all the kids came to school on time. So sometimes you have to be creative in order to make sure that what you're dealing with, and the moms saw the children learning, and sometimes off task, and the mothers would say to their own children, pay attention. When you reach agreement, not everyone, but most of you, you're going to write down, so one for T, one for I, one for D, one for E, a couple of things, 3 to 5 things you all agree on that you saw that was common across all 4 classrooms. So things like, we saw technology being used in all 4 classrooms. But you may say, this is what we saw in all 4, this is what we saw in some or a few. So it doesn't have to be only what you see in all 4, and just put a word in front of it, a descriptive word in front of it. Some, few, many, whatever you want. And we're going to take about 20 minutes for that, and then each group is going to share. So you're going to present, you can present in Norwegian, or you can present in English. Anna-Karin will translate if you're presenting in Norwegian. It's easier for me to read Norwegian because there are familiar roots of words, and I can kind of get it, than it is to listen. Once all the groups have presented, then I will tell you what I saw. We're going to do exactly the same thing in the afternoon. We're going to wander to the 3 classes. You will take notes. We're going to organize the notes. Then you will present, based on what you saw in the afternoon, what was similar and different from the morning. And then after all of that, later, then we're going to give the teachers some feedback. So that's the plan for the day, and we're going to have lunch in about 20 minutes, after we all present. So we're going to start with this group, and we're going to wend our way last to this group. This afternoon, we're going to start with this group and wend our way back, because that's fairer. Yes? Any questions?
That's our speaker. My teacher voice. Yes, outside voice. We discussed that maybe some of our observations was borderline observations between tasks, instruction, and design. But I don't think that matters very much. We had the impression that there were little doubt about what the pupils were supposed to do. So the tasks have been presented quite clearly. We saw also examples that the goals were presented and visualized.